everyone, my name is Lindsay Sullivan and I am the Education Manager for the National Demolition Association and your moderator for today's presentation. I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar, Demolition Foundation's webinar series, Project Management, presented by Tim Barker. We are encountering a few technical difficulties this morning, so just please bear with us for the next couple of minutes as we get everything going. Once we do have the presentation kicked off, we do encourage you to submit questions during the presentation. You can do so by selecting the Question tab on your control panel, which is located at the bottom of your screen. Simply type a question and hit send. As time permits, we will answer questions from the audience at the end of the program. All attendees will be able to see all of the questions that are submitted in the Q&A tab as other attendees submit them. If you really like a question and want to see it answered, click the thumbs up button next to the question. That will move the most popular questions to the top of the queue and allow us to start with those popular questions first during Q&A. And now we'll get it turned over to Tim.
All right, so thank you all for joining us today for the fundamentals of demolition project management. This is just a quick overview of a much longer course that we provide, and hopefully you can all join us here in the future for this. I'm going to rush through the presentation today, but I'm planning to stop at some key points just to give you a few really good takeaways from this as we kind of unpack the material in a quick version. So, introduction, project setup, project implementation, and project closeout. These are the first four things that we're going to talk about today. So when things go right, as you can see here, the project was demolished, the electrical panel is still there, the sidewalk's not damaged, there's a fence around the site, it looks great. When things go wrong, unfortunately, things get damaged, obviously. Sitting on top of the building, this happens often in China. They work their way from the top down, or an excavator is too close to a building, and unfortunately the building ends up on the excavator, buildings fall the wrong direction. So obviously there's some risk in our industry, and our goal is to mitigate or remove some of that risk. So the project setup at the beginning, when you hear of an opportunity, I hope or assume that you have some type of go, no-go process where you look at the opportunity and determine if this is a good fit for you. Not every opportunity is a great opportunity. So sometimes there are things, maybe projects are too small for you or too big in your area, or you look at the competition and realize this is probably not the best fit for us. You look at the risk associated with the project and you decide at that time, based upon these risk versus reward in your relationship with the client, if you're going to proceed with pursuing the opportunity or pass on it for something better. So from there, if you decide to move forward, there may be a pre-qualification step, maybe a bid bond required, performance payment bond, all things to consider. If you can't provide a performance payment bond, it might not be the right opportunity for you for the amount that they're looking for. There could be, if it's a local or federal project with municipality, an MB, WB, DB requirement, and hopefully you have those partnerships in place so that you can pursue those if you're not a small business or disadvantaged or minority small business. So the estimate and bid process, this is very important. What is an estimate? Well, an estimate is developing one. Is not exacting, it's estimating. So it's not going to be exactly what the cost is, but the better you get at estimating, the better you will be in making a value judgment on what the price of a project should be, and if or not. It sets the goals for the project, and sometimes a good project manager or a good situation, maybe the market changes, so the scrap value increases, allows you to do better than originally planned. An estimate should include, obviously, your quantity takeoffs for disposal material as well as recyclable material. Your man hours, your equipment. It should include, if you're using these subcontractors, clearly if there's any regulated materials, asbestos, lead, silica, PCB, silica is going to be almost something that you're going to have to start dealing with on most projects as you usually you can mitigate it with water, some type of dust suppression. And then understanding the scrap quantities. Oftentimes you're going to have universal waste, bulbs, ballasts, switches that are going to need to be removed, e-waste on some projects. Materials, you're going to understand if you need materials that you have to order or if there's a lead time, and understanding that up front as you develop your estimate. How much backfill is required to restore the site, and then what type of fencing or other items. Salvage credits, how you handle that internally varies. Permit fees. The permit fees, sometimes the permits have some fine print that will determine or direct you to do certain things or not other things that you should be very aware of. Exclusions from the scope over time, other things that need to be considered as you develop your estimate. When you develop that bid, hopefully you have some type of check sheet that allows you to understand that you've captured everything and that that somebody else maybe has reviewed your estimate. Ideally, even if you're the owner of a small business, it's always great to get a second set of eyes to go through it. Oftentimes, there'll just be a small mathematical error that's maybe not obvious to you, but is obvious to somebody else when they're reviewing the estimate. And then lastly, have you read the contract? It's very important. Read and agreed with the contract. Oftentimes, if you're providing a bid, the owner, especially if it's a public project, will provide a contract and you have to agree to it up front because they're not going to allow you to make changes after the award or if you're notified that you're the low bid. Sometimes you can negotiate the contract. We'll talk about that here right now. Key sections of a contract: general, supplemental condition, the scope, contract value. And there's more to it, but these are the highlights. As a contractor, you may or may not be aware you're in the contracting business. The service you provide is abatement and demolition, but you're, as a contractor, the key word in that is contract. You don't understand contracts, you probably won't be in this business too long, especially as a small business owner or even mid-size or a project manager. Supervisors obviously need to understand the specifications and plans, but as you work your way up through an organization, you're going to need to start evaluating contracts and understand what your risk thresholds are. There's two types of major risk on every project. Project risk, that's a physical risk on the project. Contractual risk. Project risk obviously can result in serious injuries, environmental impacts, other challenges. Contract risk can result in deductive change orders, costly lawsuits, and all these things happen often before you get paid, where the owner's holding, or the general contractor is holding your money. So you really need to understand your contract. So in order to pursue projects and understand what your risks are, it's great to have a risk management plan. Now, I'm not going to talk about this too much because we have a whole nother course for this, but this is different than a action item. Things that you need to make sure that you've covered, like an estimate, for example. A risk management plan is a great offense. It goes beyond insurance and indemnification and other things to really understanding what your risks are and what your risk thresholds are as a company as you look at individual projects. And again, if you can join us for the risk module, we'll really spend some time identifying, assessing, and mitigating the risk that creates a lot of challenges for small, medium, and even large-sized companies. Pre-job administration. Defining the roles and responsibilities of the team members is crucial as you get ready to begin a project. Understand where you fit in with the other players. There's a general contractor, owner, or other trades. Understanding the schedule of values, which is how you get paid based upon whether it's monthly, progress, or milestone. Bonding, we've talked about a little bit. Can you provide a surety bond? If you're a small, medium-sized business, keep in mind when you provide a bond, your surety agent or the company that provides you the bond is asking you and your spouse to personally guarantee it. So it's very serious. Buyouts, subcontracts, permits, and leases, all things to consider in pre-job administration. So with that, you have a pre-job survey. Why does it matter? Well, I think most of us are familiar with this incident here on the corner of 22nd Market Street in Philadelphia. To this date, I think this has been the most fatal demolition catastrophe in the United States. During the demolition, there was a freestanding wall about 4 stories. Contractors removing the floors. It wasn't supported on one side. It fell over onto an occupied Salvation Army, killing 6 people and 7, if you count the inspector who took his life days after this, which is very tragic. All of it's tragic, but the fact that an inspector felt responsible or partial is very upsetting. So what is a pre-job survey? Well, it surveys the risks, the hazards. And as you look over here at the Hoagie City, you can see the wall, how tall it is above the Salvation Army. It doesn't look like it could cause that much damage, but clearly it does and did. When you see in this next photo how it just leveled the rear half of the Salvation Army. So we're in a risky business. And so we need to, and OSHA will require a pre-engineered survey by a competent person, understanding what those risks are and identifying them so that the team is familiar with some of the greatest physical risk on the project. We have an OSHA pre-engineered survey that the NDA does that you can use, and there's other standards that require various forms, ANSI and other notifications required by federal, state, local. One call, 811, before you dig. Oftentimes, you might be in a city or residential area. You need to notify the neighbors before you get started, just so that they understand what's going on. All projects, I think demo projects, have a similar flow chart, and I just provide an example here from one of my projects proposals years ago. Starts off with the asbestos abatement, understanding what's there. Hopefully there's a comprehensive survey. How much asbestos is there, friable and non-friable? Is the contractor or is the owner responsible for making the building site facility cold, dark, and dry? Are you showing up day one when you get started, and have you taught your folks and resources to use the gap rule? That's where you physically identify that there's 6 inches or a foot separation for air. And when we say air gap, that's a gap in the electrical, mechanical, and any other utilities that provide services such as natural gas to a site, and verifying that that is separated. And then from there, responsible for the universal waste. Sometimes owners will remove some of it. Most of the time, we get it as demolition contractors. If there's any PCB and transformers, if it's greater than 50 parts per million, obviously it goes into the hazardous waste category. So it's no longer universal waste. Same thing with ballasts. They're not labeled, or non-PCB, you have to treat them as such, and that's ruled under TSCA. From there, you're looking at any investment recovery opportunities, and that's scrap or salvage, anything that can be sold. I know there's hotel liquidators out there that will come in and liquidate a hotel before you tear it down. In San Diego, Southern California, where I'm from, early on in my career, commercial projects, there were companies that would come up from Mexico and strip literally every piece of timber and lumber and take it south of the border. And by having an aggressive investment recovery program allows you to reduce your C&D waste, which is going to allow you to be more competitive. The other word that's used often is sustainability or green credit. So that's something that clients and owners are really looking for, and you can point out to them that on your projects that you're recycling most of the materials, which is great PR for you as a company too. And then from there, getting into the demolition, dismantlement, demolition, and to slab on grade, and sometimes it's below slab on grade where you have to disturb the soil. And obviously if it's more than an acre, there's a stormwater prevention pollution plan required in best management practices. And sometimes if you're on an industrial site, there's an NPDES outfall that you have to be aware of, that you're not just discharging any waters that are contaminated into the waters of the U.S. And unfortunately, we just don't have a lot of time to talk about that today. But when you come to the full module, the full day, we can unpack a lot of. So implementation, means and methods. This is one of my favorite parts, because now I used to be a contractor for 20 years, abatement contractor, and now I'm an owner's engineer, owner's rep. And so I point out to the owners that the means and methods are owned by the contractor. They develop the means and methods. We don't. And there's a lot of opportunity for you as a contractor to be competitive and to develop proprietary or unique ways that you bring down or salvage or approach buildings that allows you to have a competitive advantage over others. So when you get started on a project, where I like to start is with lessons learned. Can be positive or negative, but if there's a particular approach that you use or the industry uses that's resulting in unplanned premature collapses of structures or a high number of injuries or fatalities, clearly that should be a lessons learned. Let's stay away from that approach. But you may have other lessons learned that are positive that you want to capture. And we'll show you a form that we've developed that you can use to capture lessons learned in the industry. So design specifications versus performance specifications. So what are we talking about here? So I work for one of the largest engineering companies in the world, and we develop very detailed design specifications for building bridges, and skyscrapers, the World Trade Center now twice, the Mercedes-Benz Stadium, we're involved in that. Some of the most iconic structures in the world. Oftentimes our company has been involved in with our engineers designing those specifications. They're very detailed specifications telling the contractors exactly what products to use and how things are to be constructed and put together. Now, what's great as a demolition contractor is you don't see design specifications that often. What you're working with and what you're using, and this performance specification, so you decide how the work is going to be executed. You decide your means and methods. So it's dramatically different than the very detailed design specification approaches. It's a little more challenging for owners to manage because they oftentimes, as you know, they don't understand demolition or abatement. But at the same time, it provides you an opportunity to provide added value by bringing them up to speed and instructing them on how you're executing the work. Logistics is another thing you need to really be aware of as a project manager. And that can involve many things. Equipment are being used on the job, when they show up, when they go. Do you have lay down areas to offload the equipment? Do you have enough space or room to load the materials into trucks on and off site? Do you have an on-site truck route? Safety and environmental controls. We've talked a little bit already about asbestos and lead and PCBs, but there's also other hazards. Stored energy. Stored energy could be maybe a gas in a line. Stored energy could be water. Stored energy could be a electrical capacitor for a UPS battery backup room where it actually stores power's been turned off. So you need to understand what those other hazards are and have an approach to releasing that stored energy as well as dealing with biological hazards. Snakes, bees. Unfortunately, I know of contractors that have had great safety records only to have that change as a result of a bee sting. And if somebody's allergic, they may need medication and it may end up being a recordable injury. Hopefully you have a culture of safety. We are in a very high-risk industry. Demolition doesn't have to be. Clearly, we make it safe, but statistically, if you look at our total recordable incident rates or our fatality rate, unfortunately, we're in a very high-risk industry. So one of the ways to mitigate that risk is to have a daily tailgate meeting. Not where you're just checking off the list or getting people, what I call one person talking and everybody else providing the donkey nod, yeah, but really engaging people in a way that you know they're listening, that they're understanding what you're talking about, that hopefully the safety topic pertains to the work of that day. And it's not just something generic that may or may not apply. And have an agenda, have an opportunity for observations, provide feedback, encourage this, make it a positive thing, rather than making everything punitive where if people don't do things right, they're let go or maybe sent home. Try to provide incentives. If you can get to so many hours as an organization without a recordable injury or through the project without injury, have some type of maybe a steak lunch or some type of monetary incentive, and you'll see that will create a great positive safety culture and allow you to be a lot more competitive as a company. Your safety goal needs to be 0. No other goal. All the clients that you work for, the safety goal is 0. The challenge is do you have a plan or approach that allows you to get there, helps you get there? So that's something that all companies need to really consider, and really not only just have the goal, but have the resources and the tools that allow you to get there. As an organization, your ability to grow and continue to stay busy will be a result of how well you manage safety risk. Incident and case management. There are sometimes incidents that occur that may just be a first aid incident, but because you didn't to deal with that incident, it ends up being recordable because somebody ended up maybe receiving some type of medication that they really didn't need. So have a incident or case management program or system. And this isn't very complicated. It's just showing up at the job and understanding where the nearest hospital is, having a relationship with your medical providers, understanding if blank occurs, here's the result. Capture lessons learned and near misses, and understand what those are so that you can prevent them on the next project. Daily job reports. Sounds like it's not terribly exciting, but it is one of the most important things I think you can do as a site supervisor and project manager is keep a very detailed daily report. And the reason why I say this is because if there is an issue down the road, and oftentimes you don't know that there's going to be an issue down the road, and maybe it's determined that you should have been compensated more, or somebody's saying that you had affected their work, the only way that you're going to really understand the details behind that is oftentimes just going back to the daily reports. So these reports are very important. It's great to keep very detailed reports, noting the hours, any visitors, weather, progress, what was completed that day. Invaluable tools, especially for estimators, to be able to go back and understand what occurred and where you did very well, maybe substantially better than the estimate or worse. And so looking at this information is very helpful. It should include any accidents, inspections, visitors on the sites, as I mentioned. So with that said, we've developed, the Trade Association has developed a form that you can use for your daily reports to help you track this information. Please feel free to use this. I think it's a really good form. Information, it doesn't have to be a book, but again, the key to this is persistence and consistency, doing it every day. If you wait till the end of the week, Friday, to knock this out and try to catch up, you're not going to get the information that you need. So try to do it once a day at the end of the day and be very disciplined at this. It's going to help you in the long run. Along those lines, record keeping, cost tracking. The only way that you know how well you did or where you did well in the project is keeping track. Not only do you need to know that so you can be more competitive, but you also need to know that. So if somebody was to question that went off site to the location, or maybe an owner wants to understand where all the debris were disposed of, you'll have that information. Waste tracking, there's different types of waste. Most waste can go to C&D landfill on a demolition project, but other wastes are hazardous, such as asbestos, PCBs. It has to go to a hazardous waste landfill. Obviously, those landfills are very expensive, so you have to understand what that cost is when you're going into a project. Cost analysis, forecasting, auditing, process. If you understand early on that a project is losing money, your ability to make a change quickly will allow you to be able to correct that. If you don't receive that feedback immediately and the job's over, there's no opportunities for you to correct the issue. So again, having a very timely, ideally weekly system set in place for multiple week, multiple month projects to know where you're at is valuable, so you can make the changes as needed. Types of change orders. Some contractors like change orders, others don't. But if you're on a larger project, even a smaller project, more than likely something will come up where an owner will come to you and ask you to do some additional work, or they may ask you to do some work where they believed it was in the original contract, and you'll pull it out, you'll look at the contract, they'll look at the contract, they'll look at your proposal and realize that it wasn't. And at that time, you will perform the work as a change order, as an extra. And so you need to understand or what the client is willing to pay you, if it's lump sum, time and material, cost plus. And these things you should really work out up front when you work out the terms of your contract. With change orders, you should also seek a schedule extension so that you get some additional time with the additional work. What to do when you don't get paid? Well, first, talk to your customer. Customer is always right, but sometimes they're very difficult to work with. Hopefully, you can get to the right person. Oftentimes, you'll have to get through some type of a gatekeeper or process to find can actually write the check. And so it may take some time, but where cash is king. You have to get paid. You have to get paid timely so that you're not borrowing a lot of money. And obviously, a large line of credit is going to cost you with the interest and the other challenges associated with it. It's not going to allow you to be competitive over the long haul. So talk to your customers, stay on top of those receivables, understand the local lien laws and the contract. Some contracts may allow you to stop work, others don't. So look at your contract. There may be a situation, or maybe you're working for a general contractor and you don't have a clause that and you can just tell them, we got to work this out before we move forward. And then there's other legal options, but the last option is your legal options. Obviously, first option, work it out with your client. And then ultimately, as you complete a project, you need to close it out. So what are we talking about here? Well, you may or may not have closeout documents, but we would highly encourage that you develop some. We'll show you an example of what those are. Getting paid, clearly that should be a priority, and then ultimately a debrief. Post-mortem, what went well and what didn't? What can we learn from this project moving forward? These are all very important. Okay. Yeah, go ahead to the next slide, Lindsay. Project documentation be retained. Obviously, personal sampling, we had just talked about that, how important that is, daily reports, manifest disposal records, project status, meeting attendance. I would have all your workers sign the daily safety meeting, just so you have a record that they've attended that. Updates to the risk register. We didn't really talk about the risk register in this module, but we will in the risk management class. Pre and post work submittals. Obviously, you need to keep those. Anything that you've developed that you could use on the next project, it is wise to keep so that you have that information. Other environmental documentation obviously needs to be filed. Most of the asbestos training and other information pertaining to asbestos needs to be maintained for 30 years. Next slide, please, Lindsay. So internal, we talked about debriefing. At the end of the project, you really want to sit down and understand what went well and what didn't. And I would capture that in a lessons learned. We'll show you a form here in just a minute so that you can really capitalize on what went well to do that again and what went wrong and to stay away from that issue. Proper filing of project documents, most of it's electronic these days, but you should have a system that you could find, that you should be able to find stuff in less than 5 minutes. If it's taking you 10, 15 minutes to find something, you need to rework your filing system, whether it's electronic or hard copy. Notifying your bonding agent that the project's complete is very wise. That will free up bonding for other projects. And verify everything's been called off and picked up on the rental equipment, oxygen bottles, propane, those types of things, temporary fence. And as a small business owner, a medium size, or even a project manager of a large company, It's very frustrating to find out 2-3 months down the road you're still paying for oxygen and propane bottles. So it's very important to stay on top of those as they are delivered and then picked up. Next slide, please. Getting paid. Go ahead, next slide. What does the customer require? You need to be aware of that up front. As far as the lien waivers for you, your subs, material suppliers, it's real important that you don't sign off on a lien waiver unless you understand what it says. The lien rights are very key to your future success. If you give away your lien rights, sometimes you might not be able to get paid. And then understanding what are the payment terms going into a project. Is the client paying 30 days, 60 days? Do they offer a discount? If they offer you an opportunity to provide a discount, sometimes it's as low as 0.5% or 1% to get paid in 10 or 20 days. Again, cash is king. That may be something that you want to avail yourself of. And then what other type of backup do they require? Understand that going into the project so that you can get paid. Next slide. Debrief. So key components of a debrief, organized, written, should include the key players in the project. And I would say that you leave your titles and your positions at the door. You come in, you sit down, you're on even playing field. Capture those notable lessons learned, again, positive and negative. We have an approach where it's a no name, no blame process to lessons learned. And then let all voices be heard and respected. If there is any type of harsh individual criticism, or if everyone is not respected equally, you're not going to have a good lessons learned. You're not going to understand what went well and what didn't so that you can improve on the next project. Next slide, Lindsay. So here's an actual lessons learned form that I use for capturing. Again, it's no name, no blame. We're not looking to point the finger, but we want to understand what happened. As you can see, there's some multiple boxes that you can check: near miss, accident, property damage, unplanned event. Maybe it's an estimating issue, management issue. But again, all this information is very important. If it's something very serious, you might even bring in a separate party to do a root cause analysis. Oftentimes, it's very important to, especially if it was an accident, to separate all the witnesses, get their stories separately, and then someone can bring that information together. Ideally, someone that's unbiased. And it's not that people are being misleading, just depending upon where they were when the incident occurred provides a different perspective. And when you get all the facts, you can understand exactly what occurred. I've done this a number of times with clients, and it's very helpful and very beneficial to have correct information that's not biased or slanted towards or against one person or another. And then that provides you the description of what happened, what you learned from the event, what actions can you take to prevent a reoccurrence. And then after you've had lessons learned and for some time, you can go back and look and see if they were effective. Next slide. Closeout documents, getting paid and debrief. Next slide. Lindsay? So coming down the home stretch. So final thoughts. I think there was one more. Is there not, Lindsay, after that? Nope. I guess we're getting to questions. So that was just a recap on, again, closing out the project. Projects aren't over until the paperwork's done. So it is very important to make sure it's organized, it's filed, that you have a system in place that you can go back and not reinvent the wheel when you have, maybe you tore down a house or an apartment complex or a parking structure and you're looking at another one. You definitely want to understand, well, what did we learn from that last job? How many tons, how many cubic yards were there? What issues did we have? Was it post-tension, pre-stress, the parking structure? How did we approach it? Those are the type of things that would be very helpful. So with that said, Lindsay, can you, I don't think I can hear you right now. Go ahead and talk for a second.
Yep, you can. I have myself on, but I'm here.
Great. So right now, does anyone have any questions that we can help you with? I know that was a quick overview of our project management course. And if you join us, we'll spend a whole day and have some breakouts where you work with your peers on various things. And it's very enjoyable. What questions do we have today, Lindsay?
So first, thank you, Tim, for our presentation. Thank you to all of our attendees for being here. And thank you for sticking with us through a couple of those glitches that we've experienced today. I think we're back. Everything is working quite well at the moment. So as a reminder, you can submit your questions in writing by hitting the Q&A tab on your control panel. At the moment, no questions have been submitted, but I'm sure that you guys have some. So go ahead and get those in, and we'll start going through those questions shortly. And also, while questions are being entered, I did just want to mention that this is the third in our 4-part series of our Demolition Foundations webinars. Next week will be our 4th and final webinar, which is our preview of the job cost tracking module of our certificate program. That is going to be on Tuesday, May 12th at 2 p.m. Eastern. You can go ahead and get registered for that now if you go to the NDA website, or you'll get an email on Thursday with the information about how to get registered for that. So we would just love to have you on that program as well. So go ahead and get your questions submitted. Tim, I'll turn it back to you if there's anything else you'd like to share while we wait for our first couple of questions to pop in.
Yeah, again, I apologize for the technical difficulty. Technology is great when it works, but it's always good to have a backup plan, clearly when it doesn't. So I'll just wait for some questions.
Great, Tim. So there aren't any questions that have come in now, but I'll ask a question. So you talked about lessons learned, and what do you do? So if someone completes that single sheet of lessons learned, how do you manage keeping those organized so that you can actually utilize them in the future? I feel like sometimes we'll document things and then they just kind of go into a file and they're not ever revisited or used. How do you recommend or suggest that people utilize those lessons learned and keep them organized for the future?
Great question, Lindsay. I appreciate it. So there's 6 check boxes at the top of that form, and you can make it 8 or 12 or whatever different categories you want. And so I will capture the lessons learned, and then I have a Excel spreadsheet where I can break them out into these 6 different categories or 8 or 10, and I can search those categories when I get ready to start a new project. So I also, if you notice, it says in the second box, common word descriptions, description of the event, lessons learned from the event, common word. And so I can set them up in a pivot wizard in Excel and search for that word. I have probably well over 100 lessons learned that I use on a regular basis when I get ready to start a new project, especially if the project's very similar to one that maybe I executed, who knows, several years ago. Like, for example, I hadn't been involved in a lot of downtown building implosions for some time. I used to do that a lot, kind of early, middle of my career, a lot of building stadiums. And recently, about 2-3 years ago, after we built the new Mercedes-Benz Stadium, part of our contract was to take down the Georgia Dome. So behind the scenes, they asked me to go down there, just take a look at it, see if we were ready, evaluate the risk. And there were some things that I was able to point out that I think helped the contractor and helped the project along. But one of the things that really helped for me was just going back to my other projects and understanding some of the challenges that we had, whether it was managing the perimeter, you have tens of thousands of people showing up, or dealing with the press or press narratives, or even some of the technical challenges that we had there with utilities, nearby structures, and how they were protected. And so again, just being able to go back to that information from past projects and taking a look at what went well and what didn't greatly benefited me. So thanks, Lindsay. Any other questions yet?
You're welcome, Tim. So far, no questions. Looks like we've got a quiet bunch today. So since this is kind of a preview of our live course, we did want to make sure that you all knew that as of now, we are planning to have live courses this fall. Hopefully we will be at a point where we're able to have people traveling again. So we are offering all 4 courses in our foundations program this fall. The estimating and the risk management programs will be in Chicago in September. And then this program, project management, as well as our job cost tracking course, will be offered in Atlanta in October. So project management will be October 14th to 15th and job cost tracking on October 16th. Those are open for registration now if you want to check out the NDA website at demolitionassociation.com. But Tim, since we don't have any questions at the moment, why don't we tell them a little bit more about what this course looks like when we are live and we have 2 full days instead of an hour. We have a lot of interaction. One of the things that I think is always so great about this course is when we talk about change orders and the activity that we do around that. Thought maybe that would be something fun to share with people as they're considering perhaps attending our 2-day in-person course.
Yes, most definitely, Lindsay. I think the most exciting thing is the breakout groups that we have during these courses. And we set up a project, a sample project, and then we throw some scenarios at the different groups. When I say groups, we break you up into 5 or 6 people that you're working with, and then we send you back to the contract to the project documents, and then you develop the amount that should be due to you as the contractor for the change order. And then we'll have you come back, and sometimes we'll have different teams, whereas one acts as the owner and the other acts as the contractor, and we'll go back and forth and negotiate a change order or an extra. It's a lot of fun. It allows the contractors to see there's different perspectives. Oftentimes it's not right or wrong, it's just really how you handle those situations. And we really coach the contractors on that. What's great about my role is after being a contractor for 20 years and now representing owners the last decade, is I really try to pull back the curtain, so to speak, and share with the contractors, here's what the owners are thinking. And oftentimes they're not out against you. It's just information or how you present yourself and little things that help contractors be successful in change orders just by being professional and kind and to the point. And you don't have to give away anything. If you're due something, you should get paid for it. Oftentimes the owners that you're working for, the general contractors, they have a lot more money than you do. And if you're due some additional cost, you should get paid for that. So we'll walk you through that, not only the cost, but maybe the impact to the schedule, maybe other areas that you hadn't thought of, allowing you to really benefit from those times. So yeah, great question, great time. Thank you, Lindsay.
You are very welcome, Tim. We're going to do a last call for any questions that you have, burning questions about project management, even if it's not things that were necessarily covered in this presentation, but if there are things that you'd like feedback on or would just like to discuss, get Tim's opinion, we're all ears. And while we wait for that, Tim, I'll just ask if there are any final comments that you'd like to share.
Yeah, again, it's the dynamic of doing this in person is so much more enjoyable. It's a better learning experience. Technology is great when it works, but it's not the best medium. And it's one of the reasons that we decided to have the 40-hour courses in person, just allowing you to interact with your peers, some owners, the 2 instructors, myself and Greg, or maybe myself and David Sinclair, Steve and others who do a really great job just kind of, poking at each other, going back and forth, getting different perspectives from different people that were either estimators or project managers or owners. And just by the way, we've established a very high bar for our instructors. I think it's 20, 30 years experience on average for some of the larger, medium, best-in-class companies in the industry. So there's a lot to learn. It's a great environment to ask questions. And I really enjoy it. So hopefully you get a chance to join us one of the coming up sessions. So thanks again, Lindsay.
Great, wonderful. Well, thank you again to everyone. Oh, here we've got one. Do you cover vendor selection and creating subcontract agreements in the full class? Tim, do you want to speak to that?
Yeah, a little bit. We have sample contracts, vendor selection, depending upon that's such a wide question. There's so much there, but if we're talking about pre-qualifying subcontractors, we definitely cover that, what to look for in those subcontractors and vendors. Oftentimes, well, it's a really good question. It would be great if, if I had a little more insight, if that was trucking or maybe abatement contractors. We have some sample forms that I think that we provide during the course, showing you what type of questions that are often asked by the owners for you as a contractor to get pre-qualified. And some of those questions you should be asking from your subcontractors and your vendors, just to make sure that they're going to be around when you're ready to execute the project, or they have the correct insurance, or if it's a large subcontractor, if you're required to provide a bond, that they need to provide a bond. So hopefully that answers the question.
Great. Thanks, Tim. So for our attendees, since we are approaching the end of the hour, again, just another big thanks to Tim for today's presentation, for you all being here and participating with us. When you close out of the webinar, you will be redirected to a brief evaluation survey. It takes about 3 minutes to answer. We would really appreciate if you could just take those 3 minutes and give us your feedback, both the good and the bad. And we know that there are some technical difficulties today. But that data really does help us to determine future NDA educational offerings, and making sure that we're providing our membership with the information that they want to know. And if you do have any additional questions that maybe you didn't think of during the webinar but would like to get answered, feel free to contact us at education@demolitionassociation.com, and we can make sure to get those answered for you. Thanks again for attending, and have a great rest of your day.
Great. Thanks again, Lindsay. Bye-bye.
Bye.